rounding numbers. When an approximate value is enough information, too much information can be unnecessarily tedious. I can round numbers. So for example, 16.75. If I wanted to round this to the ones place, I'm basically asking, is this closer to 16 ones or 17 ones? Which is the better estimate? Which is the better approximation for 16.75? Well, I need to look at what fraction of ones I have, and so I'm going to look one place to the right and ignore everything else. I'm just going to focus on my tenths place. In this class, if it's 5 or greater, then we'll round up. If it's half or more, we'll round up, and if it's 4 or less, we will round down. So in this case, my 7 is greater than or equal to 5. So I'm going to round up to 17. And since I'm estimating to the ones place, I'm not going to include any information after that, because my ones place is the most precise that I'm getting, since this is rounding to the ones place. But what if I were rounding to the tenths place? Well, then I will look at, if I'm rounding to the tenths place, I'm going to look at my hundredths digit, and I'm asking, is it closer to 16.7 or is it closer to 16.8? 7 tenths or 8 tenths, since I'm rounding to my tenths place. Since 5 is greater than or equal to 5, I'm going to round up to 16 and 8 tenths, and I'm going to leave, I'm not going to write anything over here. And I didn't say y earlier, but if I were to say 16.80, we might talk about this more in your science classes, but to put a 0 here indicates actually that this is precise to the hundredths place. But it's not. I actually had a measurement to the hundredths place, which was 0.75. I got rid of that information by rounding for different reasons. Maybe I only need that information down to the tenths place. And so to be honest with my number, I would not put that 0 there. Right? That's actually not what it was. This is what it is, rounded to the tenths place. And so I will have my tenths place and write nothing else. What if I were to round this same number to the tens place? Rounding here. Well, I'll look at, right, this is either going to be 1 10 or 2 tens. Is it going to be 10 or is it going to be 20? Now here, unlike these other places, I actually have a placeholder 0, because otherwise I would just have a 1 or a 2. I will lose my place value information. So if I'm rounding to the tens place, either it's going to be 1 10 or 2 tens, which I need to write this way. So I look at this digit. My 6 is greater than or equal to 5, so I'm going to round up, and this is going to be 20. I won't include any other information, but I do need to include the 0 because I need to indicate that this is 2 tens or 20. Sometimes you'll need to do this with decimals as well. For example, what if I had and I needed to round this. Let's say I want to round it to this place, the thousandths place. I would look at the next digit over, right? Because if I'm rounding to this place, I'm trying to decide if this is 167 thousandths or 168 thousandths. I'm rounding to the nearest thousandth. So this number to the right, my 10 thousandths, is greater than or equal to 5, so this is going to round to 168 thousandths. And again, I'm not going to add any other information over there because this is rounded to that place. And so I'm going to stop there. Now what if I were rounding this number, and let's round to the hundredths place. Let's round here. Hundredths. The nearest hundredths. Either this is going to be 12 hundredths, or it would be 13 hundredths. I look at this number. It is not greater than or equal to 5, and so I'm going to round down, and this will simply be 0.12. Let's take one more example. Let's say I had this number and I wanted to round to the hundredths place again. Well, I'm going to look at the number to the right. I see that it is 4 or less, and so I'm going to round down. I won't round up to 11 hundredths, I'm going to round down to 10 hundredths. And now this is interesting, since I'm rounding to the hundredths place, I'm going to leave that 0 to indicate that this is the most precise piece of information I am keeping in this number. I'm not going to drop it off and say 1/10, because I'm actually rounding to the hundredths. So I need that information. Right? This is saying I know this down to the hundredths, because that's the place that I rounded to. I would say 0.1 if I were rounding to the nearest tenth, but I'm not. I was deciding, there's the bell, I was deciding between 10 hundredths and 11 hundredths, and 0.10134 is closer to 10 hundredths, so I'm going to keep that 0. But I'm not going to include any others because I am rounding to the hundredths place. And so I'm being very deliberate with how many places I include. So you see, when you are rounding, you need to always include numbers down to the ones place in order to make clear what that number is. Right here also, I'm including all the numbers back to the ones place, back to the ones place, and back to the ones place, but no others. In the same way that I don't include zeros over here, right, that doesn't add any helpful information. I don't include any zeros after my place.